Another thing that happens is men find that they cannot ejaculate without pulling up images of their favourite porn star. And they feel bad about this because they want to be present during sex. They don't want to be thinking of the pornography. Or they have to pull up their favourite scenes. So this is having a really big effect on the young men. Now, what about the women? Well, a lot of the women I interview talk about being pressured into porn sex by their boyfriends and by their hookups. Because I don't know if most of you know what's going on in college campuses today, but there's very little dating and there's lots of hookup sex, which are actually, hookup sex is porn sex. It's sex with no intimacy, it's sex with no connection, it's sex with no empathy. So what you have is really hookup sex being porn sex, which is being played out on all the campuses. Studies show, by the way, that the more hookup sex girls get involved in and young women, the more they're depressed, the lower their self-esteem. What studies show for boys is the more hookup sex they do, the higher their self-esteem. So you can see who this is working for, right? Not to mention, of course, that women get much fewer orgasms during hookup sex. Surprise, surprise, okay? So what happens to the young women tell me is they feel pressured to do these things and they don't want to do them, and yet they're being told from Cosmopolitan, they're being told from Sex and the City, everywhere they go, they're getting the message that pornography is okay, lighten up, it's fun, don't be a prude. And so they have got no alternative ideology with which to come at these men and to say no and to explain why they're not. So another thing that the women tell me, which is very interesting, is how they feel like from the word go, living in a hypersexualized society, they have felt that they have to become sexual beings very early on. Because as they wander around the culture looking for images of themselves, of femininity and what it means to be a woman, the only image they get is this hypersexualized image. And we all know what it looks like, you know, white, young, blonde, thin, low-slung jeans, tramp stamp in the back, you know, pierced navel, all of these things. And this is what they get over and over again. Now, I think for those of us over the age of 35 or even over the age of 30, when we were growing up trying to figure out what it meant to be a woman, we had lots of choices. Not enough, of course, because we needed the feminist movement to expand our choices. But I remember thinking, you know, what fitted for me, what kind of identity as a woman made sense for me. And I had images to choose from that were not just the hypersexualized images. Today, those images have crowded out alternative images of being female. And what you have is women saying they choose this, but in reality, you can only choose something if you've got an array of choices in front of you. And increasingly, those choices are being limited because basically in our society, you can be visible or invisible as a woman. And what kid wants to be invisible? And you will be invisible if you don't look hypersex like your friend. And this is why there's this kind of push towards hypersexualization. So this is also what I hear from the girls and the young women. So basically, we have now women being socialized into hypersexualization, and we have boys being trained through pornography what sex looks like. No wonder there's that hookup sex. No wonder there's rape in hookup sex as well, which is what the studies are showing, that more women get raped in hookup sex than any other connection or relationship. So these are the key issues I talk about. I also look at racism in pornography, which very few people actually have ever looked at. Now, what's interesting is 1 in 4 films released to the market is called interracial. And this is a black man and a white woman. And this is geared to white men. So the question becomes, why do white men want to watch black men penetrate white women over and over again? And I was really thinking about this because, you know, it's not that long ago that black men got lynched for even the threat of such a thing. So what's going on? And then it dawned on me, if indeed pornography is about the debasement of women, what better way in a racist society to debase a white woman than have her penetrated over and over again by a body that has been marked as demonized, has been seen as deviant, i.e. the black male body? Because the history of racism in this society is the history of the demonization of black sexuality. And so what you see in pornography is the hypersexualization and the eroticization of racism, which has a profound effect on communities of colour. So I go into the image of African American women, the image of African American men, I go into the image of Asian women and Asian men, and I really look at what it means to have white skin in the pornographic industry versus skin of colour. So those are some of the issues that I talk about. I'm sure people have got some questions and issues and things you'd like to bring up. So rather than me just go on, I'm going to open it up to some questions.
So I'll start by way of introducing my question by noting that in Shakespeare there's a lot of sex and violence, but I don't mention that to endorse those things, but to mention that Shakespeare is with us today. The Drek he must have been competing with probably had plenty of it too, but was Drek and forgotten. And so I ask about your reference to all these video games. How do you avoid being accused of being a garden variety moral panic person who's talking about how pinball and Elvis and the Beatles are going to ruin our nation as well?
Okay, good question. Okay, because we always say, every generation has said, oh, this is the end of the world, the younger generation, just terrible. But let me tell you, we have never done this before. We have moved from a print-based culture to an image-based culture, where the main form of communication is the image. Now the image is increasingly pornographized. So the question becomes, what does that mean for boys to grow up in that? And I would say we are in serious, serious trouble. And I don't think we've ever been in a situation like that. And also to talk about moral panics, and one thing people often call me is say, are you a prude? Well, let me say something. If I was speaking against fast food industry, if I was talking about the obesity and the health issues with fast food, would anyone accuse me of being anti-eating? So why, when I talk about pornography, am I accused of being anti-sex? It's the same thing. Pornography is the industrialization and commodification of sex. It's not sex. Just as fast food is not just food. It's the commodification and industrialization of it. So what I'm talking about is an industry, specifically an industry. So this is not an issue about being a moral panic or being a prude. It's an issue about a huge industry that is having an enormous impact on our culture.
I was wondering if you've done any work with Professor Catherine McKinnon, or if you've worked with her, well, heard of her. She's very well known. Could you comment on that?
Yes, quite a while ago actually, we brought the Dworkin-McKinnon legislation to Boston. And we try to, basically it defines pornography as a violation of women's civil rights, or anyone's civil rights who's harmed in it. So we brought that to Boston. And I have to tell you, I have a kind of progressive understanding of capitalism. Never, though, have I seen the forces of capitalism marshal itself against a piece of legislation. Even the guy who was running the hearings, who had been a long time, assistant and aide to the rep, said he had never seen anything like the onslaught against this bill. He said not even the insurance industry is this bad. So, that's the kind of stuff. That's what happened when we worked with, Catherine McKinnon and the late Andrea Dworkin. Thank you. Hi.
I was reading Common Sense a second ago, and I was thinking, what would Payne think about this? Essentially, from a girl from Manchester, I would like to know your perspective on how you think, at least, there used to be a bridge between America and Europe, and now that bridge seems to be ever closer. The discrepancy seems to be closer together. And I was thinking to myself, do you see, with the proliferation of the internet, mass communication, all these things, do you see the bridge coming closer together? And what do you think the effects?
You mean of the countries coming together?
Well, at least our thoughts on sexuality towards it.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, because what pornography does is it universalizes the way we think about sex, because the internet is everywhere now, and pornography is one of the most downloaded, as you know. It's one of the most sought after images on the internet. So I would say that even cultural differences, cultural divides are now breaking down thanks to this sort of generic, plasticized, formulaic image of sex, which is what pornography is. So I think the divisions you're going to see a lot less. Yes, thank you.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Actually, I have a few, but I'll just ask two. The first is more about how you were able to talk to people in the industry themselves and have them open up about this, because to me, I'm thinking they would want to guard their thoughts. If you're an outsider whom they may already sense is sort of against their industry, how did you get them to open up?
You know what's really interesting is when I was there at the expo, it's 3 days long, and you know what? They were bored. They were just simply bored, and I would go and talk to them. They'd say, come and sit down. They'd be thrilled to talk about it. It was amazing. I went through notebook after notebook taking notes. And just to say what I didn't say is, interesting, I got an email last week from one of the porn producers I interviewed, and he said he'd read my book. I'm one of the porn producers, and I want you to know you're exactly right. He said, I've left the porn industry. Everything you say about pornography is true. And at the moment, we're having conversations because he's telling me what really went on behind the scenes. And this was a man who made pornography for 15 years. So, yeah, that's that. And so they did open up.
And then just my second question is more about how do you talk to someone, to the men out there? We all have brothers, friends, guy friends that watch porn, see porn. How do you talk to them in a way that's not abrasive, because I'm sure they're going to be sensitive anyway if the whole point is that it demoralizes women? How do you talk to them so that they get your world and get where you're coming from, and
that's a really
hopefully
good
shift
question.
their way of being?
Well, I say to my students, look, you're not going to, if you're looking to date a guy, the chances of you finding a guy who's not used pornography is very, very low. But everyone's entitled to one mistake. That's fine, okay? But now you're dating him, and now you're talking about pornography and why you don't want him to use it, then he has to stop. What I say to women is you cannot be in a relationship with a man who is using pornography and it be an equal one. Because pornography is about the inequality between women and men. Now, how do you do it? You have to talk to them. There's lots of stuff. There's a group that I belong to called Stop Porn Culture. And if you go to stoppornculture.com, there's lots of resources on there, lots of articles. And you need to basically introduce the men in your life to a critical analysis of pornography. Because many men have never thought critically about it, because when they look at pornography, they're aroused. And you try and have a rational discussion with an erect penis. It doesn't work, okay? So they need not to be aroused and to talk about it. So have a look for the resources on Stop Porn Culture. Yes, hello.
Hi, that was a very nice presentation. By listening to you, a scene came to my mind of an old movie, Last Tango in Paris.
Yeah.
And this is when Marlon Brando has many names to name the male organ, and most of those names are vulgar. So my question is, I'd like to know whether you think that pornography is I don't want to say collateral damage, spin-off of Western civilization and Christianity, with the idea that the sin, the sex as something that is, I think, is similar to the question that the gentleman asked, but with a spin towards the cultural influence of Western, as I said, Christianity and our world.
Okay, I mean, why have we got a porn industry? You can't, as a social scientist, I can't find one reason. There's multiple ways. I think one of our views about sex as being sort of dirty bleeds into pornography, because if you look at pornography, sex is considered dirty in pornography. She is considered dirty. The names they always call her have got the word, you dirty whore, you dirty this, you dirty that. But I think what I try to say is, look, we've probably always had pornography around us. But what's critical when we look at pornography is we have to look at it as an industry. And it began in 1953 with the first edition of Playboy. So what I'm interested in is less so in looking at sort of the vast issues out there, and really honing in on how the industry developed from 1953 to present day to understand how it functions. And it functions as all other industries do. So if you ask me why there's so much pornography around today, I would say because it has become a massive industry, because it is profit driven, because it exists within a capitalist market, and the goal of the pornographers, of course, is to make money. That's why you've got such a big industry. And the fact that it's delivered through the internet is crucial, because now it's so accessible. That changed the face of the industry.
As a follow-up, if I may, quick question. How many $1 billion a year is this?
They say, it's very hard to estimate, but one of the figures that's bandied around a lot is $97 billion a year. 13 billion in America, 97 billion around the world. Thank you very much.
I'm interested in some of the questions that you posed. I got here a little late, so maybe you've already approached them, so forgive me. But one of the things you said was, what do men get out of ATM? Now, I'm wondering, did you interview men who said, yes, I practice that, and find out what they do get out of it? one question. Go ahead.
Let me answer that and then I'll come back to another. Okay, let me tell you that I haven't specifically interviewed men on that. What I did do is I went to the porn discussion boards, which is where the aficionados of porn hang out, basically, and I read what they were saying about ATM. And there is a thread called Messy ATM.